Thank you, everyone. It's really a pleasure and an honor, really, to have you join us today for this workshop. As you will see, we have two experts that will walk us through the issues that, as workers, we face when we're not paid our wages, when we have disputes, and so on. I want to start by thanking everyone for joining us, including our media partners in the ethnic media communities. We know how important it is to have a trusted messengers, letting our communities know about their rights and things they can do to protect themselves. And most importantly, when things go wrong, where to go and get some help. We understand that there is a lot of fear in our immigrant communities, certainly complaining to a government agency, the concern that the immigration status may come back to impact us. And we want to reassure you that the information provided today, if you have any concerns about immigration status, that is the reason we are here as well. I'm Rigo Reyes, Executive Director for the Los Angeles County Office of Immigrant Affairs. And one of the things we do, most of the calls we get uh, are from immigrants concerned about the impact that taking some action may have on their immigration status. So please see us as the home in the County of Los Angeles for immigrants and your families to ask us questions, get clarification, and you will see that there is very little mystery, little reason to fear, to make sure that our rights are respected. And certainly, as of, we're going to be discussing today that we get paid for the hours we work. Don't fear that there will be immigration consequences. We want to be here to answer any questions, and we have the right speakers. We will have time for questions. We want to keep this workshop moving along as quickly as possible. We want to make sure that you get back to your families. We understand that you gotta feed the kids, put them to bed, and certainly, after you get a good amount of information. So today we have two outstanding speakers. Rose from the County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. She is the chief in charge of the wage and consumer protection programs. Certainly minimum wage violations are taking a lot of her time. And if I had a wage dispute, I would go to Rose because I know that she knows, the help. She knows my rights. She knows how to protect me, and she would take my complaint to make sure that I get the help I need. We also have Yvonne, an attorney from the legal aid agency Bet Sedek, and they provide a lot of information, so many incredible services, including some legal representation when things don't go right. So I'm not going to hold this back any longer. Rose, I'd like for you to start. And we can make this a little more interactive. Certainly, as questions come in through the chat, we can get them to you or Yvonne as we move along. So take it away, Rose. It's all yours, and I'll just stand to the side here.
Thank you, Rigo, and good evening, everyone. As Rigo mentioned, I'm Rose Basmajan. I'm the Chief over Worker Protection and Consumer Protection with the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Today, I'll explain and I'll give you a brief overview of three ordinances that we have authority to enforce in the county. The two ordinances were enacted due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the urgency that was realized pursuant to that, pursuant to our essential workers being out there and risking their lives and their health to provide services for us. So I'm going to talk about the retaliation against workers, our anti-retaliation ordinance, our hero pay ordinance, and finally our minimum wage ordinance. Just to give you a little bit of a background about the anti-retaliation ordinance, on September 1st, 2020, and in response to the pandemic, the Board of Supervisors passed a motion to allow workers in industries that are most vulnerable for outbreaks to convene to ensure their employers are following the public health orders. And this group is called Public Health Councils. They will be trained by our Department of Public Health and certified worker organizations in order for them to ensure that there's safety in their workplace. So the purpose of this program, as I mentioned, is to allow for safe workplace and to allow safe reopening of businesses. However, we do realize that when such convenings happen, there sometimes may be retaliation. And in response to that, the county adopted the anti-retaliation ordinance prohibiting employers retaliating against employees that report public health violations, such as discussing it with other employees, belonging to these public health councils, or informing workers of their rights, participating in investigations, so on and so forth. This ordinance was adopted on November 24th, 2020, and that's when it became effective. It became effective immediately. So who does
Rose, just quickly, can you speak a little slower for interpreter? Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks.
A little louder, Rose, just a little louder. Your voice often drops, and it's just so important to hear everything.
Absolutely. I apologize. I'll come a little bit closer to the mic. So
there you go. That sounds much clearer. Thanks.
Right. So who is covered under our public health anti-retaliation ordinance? Any employee that works within the boundaries of County of Los Angeles. You'll see when I go into the other ordinances, this is a little bit different because generally the board acts in the unincorporated areas of the county. However, because of the pandemic, because of the emergency, they extended that scope to all areas, all boundaries of the County of Los Angeles, with the exception of 2 cities because they have their own public health officer, Long Beach and Pasadena. So any employee that experiences discrimination, experiences retaliation due to reporting of public health violations could come to us, and we will help them with their issue. Now, it's important to note that this is not just for violations of the COVID-19 public health orders. It also extends to any public health violations. The Department of Consumer and Business Affairs is authorized to investigate any violations of the public health anti-retaliation ordinance, including that we may issue a citation for a fine up to $10,000 per violation per day and per employee that's affected. Generally, our investigation is completed within 1 year of the receipt of the complaint. Now, the ordinance also carries with it a 3-year statute of limitation and a private right of action. So a worker could go ahead and hire an attorney and file a case against the employer, request for hiring, rehiring, or reinstatement to the position they sought or held before the alleged unlawful act. They can ask for actual damages, including lost pay, benefits, and statutory damages in the sum of $10,000 per violation, and also it allows for punitive damages. In fact, our county council is also authorized to bring an action requesting same remedies on behalf of the employee. So if an employee has suffered harm and they want to go back to work and they want to get their pay, the lost wages, our county council could also file. So any retaliation that's experienced in the workplace due to reporting of public health violations And workers are welcome to contact us, and we'll investigate, we'll contact the employer, and if need be, we'll have our county counsel file on their behalf. The next ordinance I will touch upon is the Hero Pay Ordinance. I'm certain that most of us are aware because it's been on the news frequently. The County of Los Angeles passed the Hero Pay Ordinance on February 26th, 2021, which is a few months ago, a couple of months ago, and it's effective for 120 days. It applies to grocery or retail stores that sell primarily food or household goods, or a variety of prescription and non-prescription medication. Or if the store has over 85,000 square feet and dedicates 10% or more of its sales floor to groceries or retail drugs and meets all of the requirements. And I'm going to enumerate the requirements for the applicability. They operate at least one retail grocery store or drug retail store in the unincorporated areas of the county. They are either a publicly traded company or employ 300 or more workers nationwide and employ more than 10 employees per store. As any other ordinances, this ordinance does have exclusions, and it excludes public entities such as federal, state, county, and including school districts. This ordinance applies. It's different than the one I touched upon previously, the public health anti-retaliation. This ordinance applies to workers who perform work in the unincorporated areas of the county. The requirements of the Hero Pay Ordinance is that the employer provides an extra $5 an hour to the employee's base wage when the employee is physically present at one of the store locations, as I mentioned, who qualifies under the ordinance. And oftentimes we get questions as to whether if I telecommute, I work from home, does this apply to me? No, the employee has to be physically present at the store in order for this to apply. The employee can elect to receive paid leave in lieu of the $5 extra pay per hour, but they must request this in writing. And the accrual of this is 1 full hour of paid leave when the Hero Pay earned totals 1 hour of the employee's base wage. The ordinance also allows for credit for voluntary hazard pay, and I'll explain that. For example, if the employer voluntarily pays $2 extra an hour because the worker is essential and they are physically present as hazard pay, we will take that into account in order for them to comply with the requirements of the ordinance. Then they would have to pay an additional $3 to bring it up to the $5 requirement. In addition to that, there is a posting requirement in the ordinance where the employer must post a poster that has all the rights of the employees enumerated on it within the workplace, and it must be displayed in a conspicuous and accessible place where the employees can see it. That poster is available on our website for free of charge, and anybody can print it and have it. I think it's really good for employees as well to have, because it really spells out what their rights are. As far as enforcement, DCBA, specifically my team, has authority to investigate complaints of alleged violations of Hero Pay Ordinance, issue a wage enforcement order. A wage enforcement order is a citation. We can assess fines payable to both county and or the employee. And when applicable, we can ask for reinstatement to the position, for the employee to the position that they were discharged from, if they are discharged in retaliation. An employee claiming violations may also sue in Superior Court of California within 3 years of occurrence of the violation, and may be rewarded reinstatement, back pay, all penalties and or fines, treble lost wages and penalties, reinstatement if retaliated, interest on all due and unpaid wages, and reasonable attorney's fees. And now I'll move on to the last ordinance that we enforce, which is the Los Angeles County Minimum Wage Ordinance. Los Angeles County minimum wage ordinance became effective on July 1st of 2016 for large employers, which we define as employers who have workers working in the unincorporated area, 26 or more workers working in the unincorporated areas. And in the subsequent years for smaller employers, which we define as employers who have 25 or fewer workers working in the unincorporated areas of the county. Currently, the minimum wage for larger employers is $15 per hour, whereas for smaller employers, it's $14.25, but there is an increase that will take place on July 1st, 2021, which it will increase to $15, aligning with that of the requirement of the larger employers. I do want to mention that the minimum wage increases were not delayed due to the pandemic, and they will continue. Beginning July 1st, 2022, the minimum wage will be adjusted based on the Consumer Price Index, which will be published on January 1st of 2022 and will become effective in July. Much like the Hero Pay, this ordinance also applies only in the unincorporated counties of unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County, and it carries a posting requirement as well, which enumerates the rates, the rights of the employees, and where to complain if a violation occurs. Such poster must be in a conspicuous place in a workplace. And if there is no physical workplace, then the employer must provide a copy to the employee. Just as I mentioned, this poster is available on our website for free of charge, and anybody can go in there and print it. We do have authority under this ordinance to investigate and issue administrative citation for violations of unpaid wages, issue citation for retaliation, failure to post, failure to allow access to payroll records, and failure to cooperate with investigation or maintain records. And excuse me, and that is that concludes my presentation.
That is a lot of excellent information. Certainly, like I mentioned earlier, knowing our rights and then knowing where to go for help, right? Can you give us like a story that you've seen how this affected workers regarding the public health anti-retaliatory situation? Have you seen complaints? How does that play out?
Sure.
What do people look for?
Sure, and I apologize in advance. I needed some water, but I do want to mention, and I want to echo what Rigo had said in the beginning, that immigration status is not relevant to our work. So long as we can prove that the person worked at the workplace, they earn the money that they're owed, and we will investigate the case and ask for a reimbursement or back pay. Before I go into the story, I do want to mention that we take anonymous complaints. We take complaints from third parties. If somebody's afraid to come forward and file a complaint against their employer, they can have a family member, they can file anonymously, they can file online, they can email us, and I'll be happy to share our email addresses for each ordinance and in each program. And generally they could come in person and file, but because of the pandemic, that's a bit difficult to accomplish. But over the phone as well, we'll take a complaint over the phone. Any means that they can reach us, we'll take the complaint because we understand the importance of this work. Now, we do have a case, and I apologize, I will not speak to the specifics because the investigation is still ongoing, but we have a case against a company where the employee continuously requested that the employer provide masks, comply with the health orders, because she's alleging that they're working without masks, there's no sanitation, there's no social distancing. And 2 days after complaining, she was terminated. Well, our investigators contacted the employer, requested records, and we have not found any evidence of the employee not performing or being late or any cause that the termination could be justified. So we're working with our county council to see if we can either go the administrative route of issuing $10,000 a day for the violation or perhaps filing in court. I do want to mention that our fines are pretty hefty, and they are that way because we want to deter these unlawful acts. We want to make sure we're there for our community, for our workers, and even if employers as well, even if they have questions, sometimes we see smaller employers where they don't know the requirements and they need help as much as the workers. So we're always available. Any questions, we have a counseling team that will answer any of the questions. If somebody is unclear as to whether they are within the unincorporated areas, we have links on our website that they could check themselves, or we'll be happy to check for them as well. We have our posters, we have frequently asked questions that really explain what these ordinances require. And we're happy to talk to anyone that contacts us, even if they don't want to release any personal information. That's okay. When we get complaints, we don't investigate just that complaint. We investigate the entire workplace to ensure that all violations are remedies, because we do understand that when one violation exists, others may also exist, and people may not want to come forward due to different reasons, whether they're afraid of retaliation, or their immigration status is at issue. All those factors are irrelevant for us. We will investigate the case regardless.
Rose, this information, this help, what your team does, it is such a great resource, and certainly for the communities to know, right? Is this something unique to the LA County? I always brag that, I'm so proud to be in LA County, particularly as an immigrant, right? Where leadership and everyone is welcoming. Do you see this type of programs in other places? What do I do if I'm a person, say in Orange County? Who do I call for help?
Yes, so different local jurisdictions adopted ordinances, including minimum wage ordinances for worker protection. Others that did not would have to comply with the state's requirements. Generally, we tell the public, if you are unsure whether there's a local ordinance that protects you, we're happy to listen to you. We're happy to listen to the facts of your case and determine whether you're within our jurisdiction or refer you to the proper jurisdictions, such as the city of Los Angeles, the city of Santa Monica. And it's worthy to note that we are contracted to enforce the city of Santa Monica's minimum wage ordinance as well. And we are in the process of including hero pay within that contract. So that will come to us as well. City of LA has their minimum wage and hero pay ordinances. Malibu, Pasadena, and other local jurisdictions as well. But I don't want people to be deterred from contacting us, even if they don't feel that they're within our jurisdiction, because we will guide you to the right place. We will, and sometimes there's cross-jurisdictional violations, especially in industries where employees are required to travel or go from one place to another. It's also important to note that we are under a memorandum of understanding both with the state labor agency and also the federal, and we continuously work together when we see these cross-jurisdictional violations.
And is this, Rose, it's pandemic driven, a lot of these issues, right? How it impacts our community members, but at the same time, the creation of some of these protections were related to the pandemic. Do you see this continuing as an ongoing situation, protection? Where do you see this? How do you see this playing out as we kind of come out of the pandemic and to a new normal?
With the exception of the hero pay, the other two ordinances will become are permanent and for the long run, especially the minimum wage ordinance and also the public health. I think we ensure that include any public health violation, not just limited to the COVID-19 public health orders, to ensure that our workers are in a safe environment and they have a safe space to report if violations occur. The hero pay, we would have to assess it at the end of the 120 days and see if there is a need for an extension. So that may continue as well.
Well, I'm sure we're keeping you busy, right? With all these complaints. Do you see a lot of complaints coming in? Are they waves, or how is this impacting your team's workload and certainly the help that you provide to consumers is just incredible.
Absolutely, we see complaints coming in, and I think one thing that I didn't mention, and it's important, is that we don't need a complaint to investigate such violations. If we feel there's an industry that has a high rate of violation of, let's say, minimum wage, we are authorized to go into that business and check their records to ensure that no violations exist. And I think we want to deter this kind of behavior because it hurts the community, it hurts the business community, it hurts those that are complying with the laws, and it also hurts our workers. I do want to mention that if time permits, I do want to mention a story. One of my investigators walked into my office one day teary-eyed, and I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I went on the field and I saw this man working at a large chain restaurant, which we settled the case recently, in the back, in the kitchen, and his arms were burned and he was making less than minimum wage." So those are the kinds of stories we hear. Those are the kinds of things we see. And it's really important. I think this work is really important. It's important to let those workers know that we're here for you, that we don't care if you have an issue with your immigration status. We won't allow your employer to retaliate against you because we have tools and mechanisms to prevent that. We want them to come to us. We want them to trust us. We want them to know that we're on their side.
That's terrific. And I will say it again. If I need help with the wages and issues, I'm going to be calling you and your team because certainly you have the knowledge, you have the resources, and most importantly, I mean, it's very clear, you have the commitment to help folks in the community. So much appreciate all that you do, Rose, and your team. I'm going to hand it over to Yvonne at this point. I know that you have a different perspective, but that complements what Rose just discussed. Yvonne, back to you, and then we'll open it up for questions again.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us. So my name is Yvonne Garcia Medrano, and I'm an attorney with Betsedic Legal Services. We are a nonprofit in the city of Los Angeles, and among our multiple services that we offer, one of them is offered by our employment rights team. So we are very, very lucky to be one of the few nonprofits that, because we don't receive federal funding, we could help undocumented workers. So because we are one of the few organizations that can serve that population, the majority of the people we serve are low-wage undocumented workers. We tend to see mostly workers in residential healthcare, where there's a lot of Filipino undocumented workers. We see a lot of garment workers, restaurant workers, car wash workers as well. So those are the populations that we mostly work with. And we also offer, so our services are free of charge for anyone that lives or works in the county of Los Angeles. And we do have a weekly clinic that is now virtual that we're very, very proud of. And we can share that information towards the end, but anyone can call our clinic number. And what's great about it is we have a group of about 5 attorneys that kind of crowdsource the issues. So the advice we give is based on, 5 attorneys putting their minds together and evaluating a case, and we give actual legal advice, not just information. So from there is where we typically take our cases from. So for the most part, we do a lot of wage and hour cases, a lot of minimum wage violations, and also for the most part, we tend to file with the California Department of Industrial Relations, often referred to as the Labor Commissioner's Office. Though we do file in the county if the worker works in an unincorporated area of Los Angeles, or with the city as well. They have their Office of Wage Standards. And we tend to file wherever we can file. So with the state, and if we can file with the county, we do that as well. And we see kind of which one moves faster. With the Labor Commissioner's Office, one of the benefits is that there's additional penalties that can be added on to minimum wage violations, and also to delay of payment. And you can also add rest and meal break violations, which for the most part, if there's a minimum wage violation, we're pretty sure there's going to be a rest or meal break violation. So in California, you're allowed to have a minimum of 30 minutes uninterrupted, unpaid, maximum of 1 hour, and then typically in an 8-hour shift, 2 10-minute rest breaks. So usually, yeah, we see if there's one small issue, like not giving breaks or not paying minimum wage or not paying all the wages, we see a combination. So if there's one, there's probably another lurking around. And like I mentioned, for the most part, we do file with the Labor Commissioner's Office. It's like a 2-page form that could be emailed. And we have a good relationship with the Labor Commissioner's Office, and they've done a lot to really make themselves more worker friendly in the past few years. And they also are very upfront and very aggressive about informing employers that a worker's status is not relevant. They don't want to hear it. And if they do hear it, they will make sure that a retaliation claim is filed. And they also tend to prioritize immigration retaliation cases, which is also why we often file there if they're outside of LA City or LA County. And we have been seeing a lot of retaliation. I think somebody mentioned it in the chat. And it is, I think it's the hardest thing that we've been seeing, especially for undocumented workers, because once they're retaliated against or fired, they're not eligible for unemployment, right? Which is just kind of like a double punch, right? Like they don't have work, and then they don't have this safety net that is provided to pretty much every other worker. We've been seeing it a lot especially in residential healthcare facilities. And I'm trying to think where else. Kind of like, honestly, like we've seen more retaliation than I think we've seen before, but we also are not filing more retaliation cases. We'll see it, we identify it, we notify the individual of their rights. And unless they're already fired, a lot of workers are too scared to file. And the job market is so fragile right now that a lot of workers don't think it's worth it to lose their job if they do file a retaliation claim. Because we also know that the reality is that oftentimes workers are fired for speaking up, right? And that's just kind of a reality that that workers understand, and that we also have to notify the workers about. So that's been really, really tough to know that people are really being put in a tough position, and employers kind of often tend to think that they have the upper hand because of the job market being so fragile. But we have filed a good amount of still retaliation cases, especially related to COVID. Workers wanting to take time off or taking more than 2 weeks off. We've seen a lot of COVID related questions and retaliation cases. And I think the biggest issue for us is there's been so many different retaliation laws, COVID related laws that have been passed in the past few months. So there's like a federal one, a state one, a county one, some expired. When one expired, the other expired, right? So like if somebody, we have one employer, they retaliated against someone, we believe they unfairly fired somebody in December, and then they kept retaliating against workers and they fired someone again in January. The person that was fired in January has a very strong case, whereas the person that was fired in December has a weak case because the laws that went into effect January 1st were stronger than the ones before. So I think that's caused some confusion for workers, but we're very happy to see that the city, the county, and the state have really responded and made sure that the changes that we know worked last year are now are still intact now. So right, so under the California, I think it was a law passed in March that retroactively went back to January 1st. Workers again have their right to 80 hours of sick leave for COVID or to be vaccinated. But there was a gap January through March, I think 14th or something, where we didn't know what was going on. There was no law protecting workers. Well, there is no law guaranteeing workers pay if they got sick from COVID, and if it was not work related. So I think now we're a little more stable now. We know what the laws are now. We know we can provide better guidance to workers now in relation to COVID, COVID-related leave, and now vaccine-related leave, luckily. So we've seen, that's been the majority of what we've seen right now. Well, that's been the majority of what we've seen right now with wage and hour. We've also had a dramatic increase in workers that have problems with unemployment, with EDD, right? I think we've all kind of heard a lot about the fraud issues and things like that, but I'm sure it's important to address fraud, but what we've really seen is that there's been millions of workers that have been affected by by EDD trying to overcorrect itself. A lot of workers that are not getting paid, a lot of workers that are not getting paid and not being told why. And although undocumented workers are not eligible for EDD, legal residents are, right? So we're helping a lot of legal residents, and sometimes there's issues with their identification because, typically, you think of like the typical documents that the government wants to verify your information, and it's, your passport, your license, and, bills. And a lot of the times legal residents don't have all those documents. So that's been another thing that the EDD issue has been overtaking a lot of our work. And then second would be the retaliation. And then third, I think really what has been brought to the forefront is the really the egregious violations we've seen in residential healthcare, right? So it's people that are sacrificing themselves and their bodies to help others, to help our most vulnerable community, and people that also had COVID themselves. And a lot of them were getting paid like $120 a day to work 24-hour shifts, nonstop, no breaks. So it's obviously way less than what someone should be getting paid if they're living, waking up in the middle of the night to take care of a patient. And we've also seen the fear more in that community, I think in part because it's hard to get another job right now. So yeah, we've seen a lot of, I don't know how else to describe it other than like really sad situations. And at the same time, we've seen our city and our county and our state respond and try to do something. And we really, really hope that this momentum of, really recognizing essential workers, which are often workers that were previously called, like low skilled workers, how important they are to our economy and to our survival. And we really hope that that we can kind of keep riding this momentum and make sure that we continue to protect workers, especially low-wage workers, especially undocumented workers.
Yvonne, that's such an enlightening review of what you do and what you provide our community. You know, as you were talking, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of some of these employees. Particularly, you mentioned it's so hard to get another job. So you're going to put up with a lot, right? And before you file a complaint, because you figure, hey, they're going to retaliate and they're going to get me fired. And then what do I do next? So what would you advise an employee who is having some issues at work, you know, trying to figure out what is the best way to go forward? Are there any tips that you would give that person to kind of protect themselves, know their rights, but at the same time, understand the reality, right? The practicality of things so that they don't harm themselves without really realizing where things are going?
Yeah, I think the first thing we always do is we're honest with the potential client or the client and just say, you know, these are your rights, these are the protections. Like we will, you know, if they're a client, we will protect you. We will do everything we can to protect you. And at the same time, we would always say, no, no deben, pero pueden, right? They shouldn't, but they can, they do. The law tells you one thing, but well, you know, employers violate the law often, right? So we'll kind of, you know, we can talk the worker through it. Oftentimes we work with worker centers, which have been amazing during the pandemic, right? Like the Clean Car Wash campaign, the Korean Immigrant Worker Alliance, IDEPSCA. So there's a lot of really great worker centers, and oftentimes the organizers there will contact the employers directly. And I think it's often less threatening because it's not a lawyer. We've seen that be successful. Alternatively, you know, we can always offer to send a letter, and then we have a record, right? One thing we always tell workers is, I know oftentimes workers are scared to come forward and say something, but if we can't prove that the worker knew that it was you, it's going to be really hard to defend the case, right? Because they're going to say, I had no idea. But if a worker like says something, puts it in writing, sends a text, we have proof that the employer knew, and that if they took retaliation, we have proof that we told you on this day, you retaliate on this day, like we're going to have a strong claim. So we advise, we give that advice to worker, like decide, like it's kind of a, you know, a tightrope, but we let a worker know. If you put something in writing, you're kind of a little more protected. If you do it with someone else, you're more protected, right? Because then you're engaging in concerted protected activity. So we give the worker the options, guide them through the options, and then at the end of the day, support the worker when they decide what to do. Another thing I just want to mention quickly is the Labor Commissioner has implemented, I forgot what they call it. It's kind of like a preemptive program where you can call in a complaint, and before you file one, they will ask you, like, do you want us to reach out to your employer and just notify them about your rights? And it's usually not done. They usually don't mention the employee, but it's kind of like, hey, like, we know something's up, just fix it before we have to get involved type of call. And that's something new that the Labor Commissioner has implemented. So we're excited to see how that works. But that's also an option. But definitely keep records of everything. If you're going to do something, you should probably put in writing and try to do it with someone else, so you're more protected and you have a witness.
That's very sound advice, just in general, right? And certainly when wages that have such an impact, I mean, I can't imagine someone not getting paid. How do you pay the rent, the car payment, the credit card? Things just snowball to a point that you don't know what to do. In every case, I'm sure it's so heartbreaking. Do you, Ivan, have any particular story where it was just, you know, such a case? I know there's confidentiality issues and so, but if you have just in general, what you see, perhaps some things the employees did to kind of get through the challenge. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, there's so many stories, and I will say that overall, I think the immigrant community is I mean, by force maybe so resilient, and I've rarely seen a worker go too long without a job, even that's a fear. Like, where I feel like as immigrants we're survivors, right? Like we're always on the hunt. We're always like, we're always in that mode. So it's I've been so just honored to be a part of that journey with a lot of workers who who just kind of keep going and keep fighting, and that's been the most uplifting. And I'm trying to think of any particular story, but I think at the end of the day, what always sticks out to me is that the workers are so resilient, and that's not, I mean, it's usually a good thing. It's also by force because there's no other option, and that's tough. But the clients that we have been amazing at fighting and really putting in the good fight and knowing their self-worth. And those, I think, they're they're the easiest and the best to work with because they're in it for the long haul. So
Are there any industries where you see this more prevalent? I know our immigrant communities support all these essential industries, right? And it became so apparent during the pandemic that they didn't have the support they needed, and certainly having to continue, as you said, showing up to work, not just putting themselves at risk, but their families as well. Have you seen any industry where this seems to be more prevalent?
aside from the residential healthcare or like in-home care, domestic workers, I think, have been really impacted by COVID. There are people that like clean homes or take care of children. A lot of them lost their jobs, right? Because people didn't want others coming in and out of their house. And I think that feeling of like being disposable when you are so intimately involved in your employer's day to day, you're in their home, you're caring for their children. And I think seeing a lot of domestic workers lose work and then again not have the protection of EDD or the safety net of EDD, that was really hard. Or domestic workers, when they get sick, their employers don't want them back, right? Because there's that kind of that stigma, at least in the beginning, more that stigma like you had COVID, like you're not being careful, you're not taking care of yourself, you're gonna get us all sick. So that was another thing that we saw right away, is there was no more domestic work available for, it's a whole industry, right, of people, especially undocumented, especially women. So that was another industry that got hit pretty hard, pretty quick.
That's gotta be heart wrenching for these employees that suddenly see their livelihood just disappear, right? I wanted to ask you, and Rose, I'm sure you can chime in too, culture. I know that in a lot of our communities, the employers, particularly families who employ the nannies, other domestic workers, uh, culturally, I'm from Mexico, right? Where families hire these nannies to kind of stay and live with them. Some of them are relatives, and it's where neither the employee nor the employer see the arrangement as such. It's more like a family kind of arrangement, but at the same time, the employee is not getting the compensation that is owed them. And certainly here that continues, and we see that in different scenarios throughout the communities. Do you see that, especially now during the pandemic, a family has hired, say, a nanny who is putting in, 80, 100 hours, and yet not really getting the compensation that they should? What would be your advice to those folks that are finding themselves in that situation?
What we oftentimes don't see is that these workers don't come forward and will not complain because they don't feel that anything is wrong. They feel like they're privileged to have a job. So that's one of the areas we're really exploring to see how we can work more effectively are in-house care workers. We had cases where it was in-home care workers where you would go in and they would say they're not working for their family member, that they're living there and they're helping them out. So reporting, I think we really need to encourage the workers to come forward because they're working. They're entitled to earn the fair wages. They are entitled to protections. And you're right, Rico, oftentimes they work more hours than they should. They work around the clock and not get paid for it. I think one of the biggest hurdles we have is that they're not reporting.
Yeah, and
If you want, Yvonne, you want to add anything?
yeah, it's similarly, like the cases we usually don't see the cases until the worker's fired. Then they're like, yeah, then it's like the emotional roller coaster of like, I thought we were, they were like my family, like they treated me like family, and then that feeling of like feeling disposable and losing your livelihood and often losing your home at the same time, right? If you were living. So that's usually when we see it. And with in-home care, it's like, I can talk about that forever because the whole system is impractical for both people that need in-home care 24 hours and for workers that want to provide 24-hour care, right? Like it's the whole, I don't know what that's going to require other than like a whole like healthcare / employer bill. And that's a tough one. But at the end of the day, the law says you have to pay your employees minimum wage. And if you're not, then you're violating the law, so.
Well, a lot of work to be done, and certainly what you are doing, as I said, being a county resident reassures me that there are places to go, get the right help in a welcoming manner, right, where you understand where these employees are, and even like you mentioned, the culture, the immigration, certainly the language sensitivities for us to be mindful. So here we are approaching the end of the hour. I know we had scheduled this for an hour and a half. If you don't mind, Rose, Yvonne, to stay with us a few more minutes. Sandy, I'd like to know if there are any questions in the chat that we haven't answered. Y en español, por favor, si se sienten más cómodos, como mencioné anteriormente, en la parte baja de la computadora está el símbolo allí de, parece un mundo y está interpretación. Por favor, conéctenle ahí y tendrán la opción de hacer sus preguntas, de escuchar y hacer sus preguntas en español. Así es que no se detengan por ello. Sandy, I just mentioned in Spanish that folks can drop their questions in the chat. They can choose Spanish interpretation if they came late. But at this point, we want to see if there are any questions unanswered that our experts may try to get you the answers either right now, or we can definitely research and get back to you if need be. We'll take Sandy back to you. Have you seen any questions that are pending?
I think a big question is almost drawing on the experience of our two speakers. Would they say that conditions for workers who've remained in their jobs during the pandemic have gotten worse overall? When you say that you're not hearing from enough workers, does that mean you assume that either things are going okay or that somehow these violations of worker rights are happening under the surface and people are too scared to report them? I guess I'm asking you a journalist question that is in the absence of data for your impressions. What's your big worry about what's going on with worker rights? That's in a number of questions.
I think we do still see complaints coming in, and I think there are still issues with worker protection, and workers are still experiencing some violations of, I can speak for the county on behalf of the minimum wage team, that of violations of minimum wage, and the other two ordinances we enforce as well. I think the issue is when I mentioned that workers are not coming forward, the issue is relevant to the industry. There are some industries that we're aware of that it's hard to get the workers to comply with us. And because of our directed authority, we do go out there if we have reason to believe there is a violation and try to get compliance from the workers for us to put a case together and either refer to appropriate agency or pursue what we have authority to pursue under the administrative process, issuing a citation, engaging the employer, deterring them from acting in such a way. I think the issues still exist. They very much do. We still continue to get complaints, and I think the issues in certain industries are going to continue to exist. And we have to collectively come together with our trusted partners, with our agency partners, to ensure that we get the workers to come forward and they understand that these protections are there for them to feel safe.
Yvonne, could you answer what you're seeing? Thank you for both of you for your read on this.
Yeah, and so in the chat, I just shared a report that just came out. I think it's the only one that I know of that that addresses or that discusses how COVID has affected low-wage Asian and Latinx workers specifically during the pandemic. And there's some really good data, some really good facts in there. I think they interviewed 636 low-wage workers were surveyed and interviewed, and it's a great kind of a snapshot of what workers have been feeling and thinking. And so I did want to share that with you. I actually think it may have just been published today.
That's great.
Yeah, so there are some numbers in there.
Okay.
And anecdotally, I mean, even personally, I'm scared that a lot of the, like, car wash has made a lot of progress recently, right? In the past few years, garment has as well. And we started hearing stories of things happening that we hadn't heard about in like 5-10 years, right? Like workers working for tips only again, or like this, like there's more like harassment or more hurry up, right? Which we also hear a lot in warehouse, right? A lot of like more pressure and things like that. So our concern is that we're seeing a return to that we're going to lose a lot of the progress that has been made in the past few years. And again, just anecdotally, but it'd be interesting to see.
And that's a very important thing for us as journalists to know. So thank you for that. We have a question, very interesting question from someone who is an undocumented business owner who hires undocumented employees and is committed to supporting her community, and she asks, is there any advice for undocumented business owners?
we always kind of just say that we focus on giving advice to employees, right? Not employers. And unfortunately, right, the law prohibits the hiring of undocumented workers. So it's hard to be like, yes, that's great as an attorney. At the same time, it's a reality. And it's, I think any employer that hires anybody, just make sure you're paying your workers right and taking, following the law and that, yeah. I'll say that that's kind of my only advice is just make sure you're protecting the workers and you're following the law.
That's very good. Back to you, Rigo.
Thank you, Sandy. Rose, anything you want to add to that? I mean, certainly, would there be any issues when folks file complaints, whether the business owner is undocumented? Does that play any role in you following up when someone needs help?
For our purposes, it doesn't. We don't consider, so long as the requirements are followed. I want to echo what Yvonne said. I think we want to ensure that you comply with what is required, pay the wages that they're entitled to, and follow state and local laws on employment.
Well, I think this will do it. I know there were some other questions. We will look at the chat now and after to make sure we get back and answer them. The information you both provided, it's incredible. As I said, I feel that living in the county of Los Angeles and having these resources goes a long way, particularly when we as employees feel that we have very little leverage, as you said, both during the pandemic when it was so hard to get a replacement job. So I think we are really tolerating a lot of issues that we wouldn't otherwise. So thank you again so much. It's been so informative. I think we'll stop here and be on the lookout for the announcement for the next workshop we have lined up for next month. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, team. Really appreciate all you do to get this information to people who need it so much. Good night.
Thank you.